Okay, welcome everybody. I'm really delighted to welcome you all tonight to this a very, very special event for us because we have known one of the curators that will be speaking today for a number of years, over a number of years. He first came to us when he was on an Erasmus exchange many years ago, I think in 2017 or something like that, wasn't it, Max? And we've been really delighted to be able to work with Ukrainian photographies over recent months. And I think I'm going to start by just saying we're in a very particular time where the world seems like a complete mess. And obviously the Ukrainian war has been rolling on for longer than people originally thought it would take place. And so there's a really key challenge here for all of us, which is how do we work together to keep contemporary Ukrainian culture alive? How do we support Ukrainian culture, contemporary culture, at a time where we know, all of us know, that it's likely that the war will be prolonged even further? So before we go any further, I should say I'm Sarah Fisher from Open Eye Gallery. I haven't said that yet. And I'm going to ask the other panelists to introduce themselves. So Max and Vitka, if we could start with you first.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you very much, everyone who joined us in this conversation in the evening. My name is Victoria Bavykina. I'm curator and researcher from Ukraine. Since last year, I live and work in London, UK. And in Ukraine, I worked as independent curator. Also, I worked as curator with one of the biggest collections that gather contemporary art, Ukrainian contemporary art, the Grunyov Art Collection. 2 years ago, I finished my PhD work in sociology of culture. And I think last 2 or 3 years, my major object of my critical review and my curatorial work, it was Ukrainian contemporary photography. And I think the last project in Ukraine, my last project was the large-scale exhibition about one of the significant and the important artists in Ukrainian contemporary field, Stas Velizlovsky, the artist from Kherson. And unfortunately, he passed away 4 years ago. But we made this exhibition with his colleagues and friends and curators, Alexander Solovyov and Elena Afanasieva. So Max, next.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. It's really a special event for us, for Ukrainian photographies, of course. My name is Max Garbatsky, and I'm a photography researcher and curator from Ukraine, based as Vika in London for 1 year already. Before moving to the UK, I was working in Mistetsky Arsenal, National Culture and Arts Complex. It's one of the leading institutions in Ukraine. I was working in Department of Contemporary Art, but photography was the main focus of my work because I have a background in photography as a practitioner. So I was curating the exhibitions of international and local photographers, working with the archives, and the last exhibition I curated with my colleagues from Arsenal was a large-scale project dedicated to contemporary Ukrainian photography, presenting the projects of major artists working with photography during the period of Ukrainian independence, of regained Ukrainian independence, I should say, from 1991 to the last year. Yep.
Brilliant, thank you, Max. And Mariama?
I'm Mariana, and I'm the head of exhibitions at Open Eye Gallery.
Thank you for coming tonight. And I am particularly moving listening to the work that you were doing in the Ukraine, both of you, and realizing that for us in the art world, the description of what you were doing is quite normal. It was sort of normal life, if you like, pre what's happened to the Ukraine. And I'm very aware that some people watching may not have had the opportunity to engage much with Ukrainian culture previously or in any depth. So I'm wondering if you guys could just talk us through some of your experience of Ukraine, of working in the Ukraine prior to the Russian invasion. So your experience of Ukrainian culture and where you felt it fitted in the world, etc. But prior to the Russian invasion.
Sure. I think it's a rather complex question because Ukrainian culture and arts scene was and still is very active, and each decade is something new because relatively young independent art and culture in Ukraine, starting from late 80s, I think. And of course, in the 90s, it was a time of liberation from the state control, from the national unions, which were dictating the way art should be practiced and exhibited. So of course, the 90s, it was a time of freedom, liberation, and free art market, and new galleries and new art groups. Maybe in 2000s and 2010s, the focus maybe shifted a little bit to actually exploring and learning what Ukrainian culture and arts are. It's maybe like more self-reflecting time, and still is now. I mean, I think it, yeah, and many people actually working with the archives, with the artistic phenomena from previous centuries, because what I think is important that for some time, for many reasons, in the West, Ukrainian art and Ukrainian culture was seen as a post-Soviet in this framework of a post-Soviet country, which of course there are reasons for it, but I think inside Ukraine is no longer relevant because we don't think about ourselves as our culture was shaped by Soviet Union and now is a post-Soviet. So it's a time of maybe more in-depth interest in what our culture is. And of course, very important is the notion of decolonization, I think. It's a major direction of thought, I would say, yeah. And especially now we understand that decolonization has to go not only inside Ukraine, it is also very important to have the external decolonization, as when Ukraine is seen by, let's say, West as an independent, self-sufficient culture and country, which of course has its relevance with the politics. And the problems we are facing now, of course, is that some people in the world see Ukraine as a part of Russia or as a ex-colony, but we need to emphasize this idea that we are now all in Ukraine very much concerned and working with this basic, important and simple idea that Ukraine is not a post-Soviet, that Ukraine is not part Russia, it's an independent state. And yeah, I think it's the main idea in Ukrainian culture and the arts now.
And I know that now you're living and you're working in London. And during this time, you set up this amazing organization, which is looking at Ukrainian photographies. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of background to that project.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. And I think that since the beginning of Russia invasion, all our colleagues and friends that working in the field of Ukrainian culture and art in general, they began to ask themselves how they could use their knowledge is this new reality, what they can do. And it became very necessary to find opportunities to best use this knowledge, to best use our work and experience, to help our country, to help our society in general. And of course, we have these questions for us as well. And before moving in the UK, we work a lot with Ukrainian photography, and we had a lot of experience in this field, and we had a lot of and have a lot of knowledge about this field. And so we had a good understanding about Ukrainian photography and culture as well. So it seems very logical for us to do something in this particular field. And it was very important for us in several reasons. At first, it was opportunity to us to make something good for our society and for our country from the UK. And of course, it was and it is our small contribution to visibility and popularization of Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian history through the photographic medium. And of course, very important was to us to create the space to represent it and talk about Ukrainian culture with our colleagues from different countries to
invite maybe.
To invite for this conversation researchers and curators. And in the beginning of these ideas in the spring, because we start to think about Ukrainian photographers in the March, we had a great support from our friend that lived in Kharkiv, and now he lives in Graz, Austria, our friend and designer Daria Titarenko, that helped us very much with design of Ukrainian photographies. And her company, Moodly company, that Daria worked with as designer, support us in the IT field and build this platform. And of course, we are very grateful for you guys, for Open Eye Gallery that support us when Ukrainian photographies was only like a couple of ideas. And so it's a common project that involved people with from different countries and from different backgrounds. And it's the main goals to involve people to speak about Ukrainian culture.
And you have there's a lot of photographers that have offered their work to the platform. And I'm wondering what, how you developed that grouping of photographers to.
Yeah, we are very grateful to all the photographers who agreed to take part. I think in general, Ukrainian photography sector is pretty much unite, yeah.
And friendly.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Because everyone shared this idea that
all sector, they have the common goal to popularize Ukrainian culture.
Yeah, and even now, sometimes you can really distinguish between art photography or documentary practitioners or different kinds of people from different contexts. I must say that now they like very open and easy to respond to the initiatives, which are a lot, of course, now. So yeah.
And I'm very interested when you were talking about, basically you were saying that in thinking about Ukrainian culture, you didn't want to see it through the lens of the Soviet, so post-Soviet. And obviously now so much of the media, when we think about the Ukraine, is rightly dominated by discussion of the war and how it's going. But within that sort of mainstream media across Europe, there is obviously this danger, isn't there, that we actually we sort of lose a sense of identity for Ukraine. Ukraine becomes this, and Ukrainian culture becomes this thing that's subjected to that influence of Russia, in one way or the other, which is incredibly terrifying, I should imagine, for you. So I want to just say well done for setting up Ukrainian photographies, because I think it's inspired And I think it's something that's really needed, particularly now, is that we really need to keep alive and keep conversations about Ukrainian culture and keep that as part of our thinking, I suppose, and as part of our discussion during the time where we'll obviously also, all of us, be keeping an eye on what's happening with the war. But it seems incredibly important that that happens. And I wondered if I could just bring Mariama in briefly here, because Mariama, you've just had the privilege of curating an exhibition on Ukrainian Photography's website. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you say privilege, that's definitely the word that I would use as well. And I think I should also just start by thanking Vika and Max as well, just to, even for reaching out to ask me to take part in this. And I think mainly, or first of all, because I'm definitely not an expert in Ukrainian photography. But I think what they've both been saying is that this kind of shadow of the Soviet era, one of the ways of mitigating that, or one of the ways of getting out of the shadow of the Soviet era, is maybe to work with people who don't have that bias or who don't necessarily see the work through that lens, which is maybe one way of helping to fix that or to resolve that a little bit. But I definitely think that this is a privilege to take part in. And it's just such an interesting project and such an interesting process as well. The website and the platform itself is, and I think the way they describe it as well, is a living archive. So this sense of there are so many photographers and so many projects available to look at and to look through and to introduce yourself to, and then to curate an exhibition on an online platform. It's been like such an interesting process to have everything delivered in this package in this way, which means that my research has been done, my research has been shared with me in the sense, which makes my role as a curator really, I guess, like streamlined in a sense, where it allows me to focus on the practitioners and on their projects rather than having to spend that time looking for them in the first place. Obviously, one of the roles of being a curator is to find people to work with, but it can often be really difficult to find people if you don't know that they exist. How do you find people if you don't know them? So having this platform has just been so useful. It's been such a resource in that sense. And it really helps me think about who do we work with and why are we working with these people? And this idea of working internationally or connecting with people who I didn't previously know, but have then started to form these connections or to learn more about the other work that they've been making as well. I think it's such a nice process of partnership or kind of collaborating, because suddenly I'm now in contact with these photographers that I didn't previously know, and not just the photographers who I chose to work with on the platform, but all of the other photographers who are part of that archive or were part of that resource. And it just acts as this spotlight. It acts as this way of reminding us that people are continuing to make work during these times, that art hasn't stopped during the invasion. And I think more than anything, that's been such a crucial reminder to see that art will kind of proliferate. It will be continuing to be made even at times that are incredibly difficult. I think it's just been a joy to really focus on contemporary art that has this importance of the now, and to think about what will the future historical culture of Ukraine look like, and how is it being shaped and who's it being shaped by. I think that's in terms of the practitioners, but also in terms of the curators.
And I should say to everybody that on the Twitch channel, there will be a link to the Ukrainian Photography's website, and you can go and have a look at Mariama's gorgeous exhibition, which is on that site, and do delve into the individual photographers' work, because there's some gorgeous and very interesting, quite a cross-section of approaches to photography within your exhibition, Mariama. And I think it's a joy to look at. So please, everybody, go and have a look at that. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit more about this idea of Ukrainian photographies as one of the arenas in which we're looking to kind of safeguard contemporary culture, because I'm very aware there is a lot of work happening to make sure that the heritage So statues and things that are in collections are safeguarded, and very, very valuable work, obviously. And keeping those artifacts, of course, has to be a priority as well. But I'm equally interested in the idea that we sometimes, I think, in war situations, what we can lose is actually the contemporary. It's sort of the contemporary halts, doesn't it, in some way? And what you're doing here is you're inviting people to engage with photographers that are relevant and exist within the contemporary era and the culture that's there within the contemporary era. And I was just wondering, from your perspective, what you think the best way or most effective way for the cultural sector particularly, but anybody, to support that endeavor to keep contemporary culture alive?
Yeah, it's a great question that has an answer in it, partially, I think. Because you're absolutely right that there are many vital, very important initiatives, both inside and outside Ukraine, which are aimed at safeguarding the tangible heritage, the objects, paintings, or sculptures. And of course, maybe this is the priority, because this work just has to be done, because it has to remain, right? But as important in our view is to support Ukrainian culture by actually engaging with it, working with it, maybe learning more about Ukraine and Ukrainian arts and culture by discussing it, because I think it's one of the major ways of understanding the culture. So it was basically the idea behind our platform, that we just want to create the space where people who maybe never had a involvement or great understanding of Ukraine or Ukrainian art will have the tools to engage with it, and can have a way to share the experience of engaging with it. Because I think also important thing that, considering the huge number of great initiatives and exhibitions of Ukrainian art now in Europe and around the world, which of course is great, and I think we're all very grateful to this. But it's worth saying that if these connections will remain, if this network and cooperation will continue, it will be the major and the biggest outcome of this new emerging connections. So bringing together the art sector from Ukraine with the art sector from the UK or Europe, I think is one of the best ways of making sure that Ukrainian culture is alive. It's not only alive, it is supported, it is active, and it is visible, because the visibility and the conversation and dialogue inside and outside the particular cultural phenomena or Ukraine's culture, I think is the best way of keeping it well, and hoping for other better times to come after the world has finished, because every archive is not only about the past, it's more about the future. So we think of future and how can we build a structure in which will be beneficial to everyone after some time will pass and the world is finished and Ukrainian culture exists, and I hope to say flourishing.
Yes, me too. That idea of flourishing, because I think one of the great things that we have now, obviously, is digital, in that we can communicate, we can share, and we can also call out to people to support and engage. And I know that you've invited people onto your website, but you're also inviting curators and others to actually write about the work, or to curate exhibitions, or to participate in some way. And the great thing with the digital platform is that it remains open, doesn't it, for people to approach you and contribute. And I'm hoping that there are people that will be watching this today and think, actually, I could do that. I'd like to, maybe I'd like to write a little bit about this photographer, or I'd like to curate an exhibition and work with Vika and Max to make that happen. I'd like to know more about Ukrainian photography. So part of today, hopefully, is a call out to people to say, come on, step up. We can all contribute to this, and we can keep these conversations alive. And I know Red Eye too, I should mention, are very keen. The Red Eye Photography Network in England are also very keen to encourage people to engage with this site. And I wonder if I could go back to you, Mariama, and just ask you, given your very global operating model, she always seems to be talking to somebody somewhere in the world, and a great sense of how we operate globally. What your thoughts are in terms of, from your experience, how do you think allied countries and allied individuals should operate at this time?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, because I think it's easy to think of the world as being a very large place, but I tend to think of the art world as being a very small and connected and networked place. I think that can definitely help when it comes to finding allies or finding advocates for your cause. I think just to go back to that question before, where you were talking about the cultural sector and how do we safeguard collections and things like that, I think this is a perfect way of doing that. And one of the ways that you safeguard collections in the way that you safeguard your future is by making sure that people are talking about your projects and that they know about your projects. And I think this platform is so well designed. It's so easy to look at and to use and to get a sense of what we might mean when we say or talk about Ukrainian photography. I think it's also important to say that when we've been saying Ukrainian photography, what I was looking at when I was making the selections of photographers was that it's not just about people in Ukraine and making work about Ukraine. It's about photographers who happen to be Ukrainian and are making subjects and projects about anything and everything. There's a real kind of breadth and depth to the work that they're making, just like you'd expect from anyone and anywhere. And so when I'm thinking about this work and when I'm talking about the projects or the artists or the platforms, what I'm saying to people is thinking about how do we represent these artists who we might not have heard of before, or what do we do to raise that conversation, or how do we use the platforms of privilege that we have to make sure that we are highlighting the importance of artists continuing to make work as well. So again, there's that real emphasis on contemporary practice and making sure that we are providing, in a sense, a context or model where artists are able to keep making work as well. I think what's really interesting, and you touched on it a little bit as well before, but talking about this idea of decolonizing the eye, or decolonizing practice, or decolonizing archives as well. And I think it's crucial that the artists or the practitioners are able to, in a sense, be experts on themselves and their own practice, and to be able to speak about their own practice. And for the curators or the researchers who are coming into that context, that they take on that burden of understanding, or that they take on that burden of research. It's not up to the photographers to make other people understand them. That job is kind of covered by the curators. That is the role that we're kind of meant to be taking on in that sense. And I think also when it comes to that global conversation, one of the strengths of that as well is, as I said before, and I think we've mentioned previously as well, that idea of working in partnership. So obviously we can't be everywhere. We can't be on the ground. We can't be in Ukraine looking for photographers, but that's what Max and Vika are doing. And so if we kind of stack these partnerships on top of each other and around each other, we're able to fill in those gaps so that people like me who don't have a specialism in Ukrainian photography are still able to bridge that gap and to still curate an exhibition, or to speak about or to introduce photographers that I wasn't previously aware of. I think the website just gives access in a sense. And I think maybe that is what one of the main motivations or the main ambitions of this project is. It's about giving access and giving information and giving resources so that we were able to be aware of people who are making work in incredibly difficult times. And I think just a last point is that also what this platform is doing is helping to maintain that momentum. So it's maintaining momentum for our curatorial research. So it's demonstrating that this work is of interest, that it should be spoken about on the global scale. But it's also giving artists the reminder or the encouragement to keep making work, that there are outlets, that there are platforms for their work to be highlighted and shown. And so hopefully that is one way of encouraging people to keep doing what they've been doing, because we will find you. It might take a little while, and it might take like a network of curators and researchers and galleries and, you know, random people just maybe dropping a line or getting in touch, but it will happen. So maybe this is one way of kind of continuing that process of making art.
Yeah, I have to say the ongoing nature of the web platform is the thing that really, for me, really resonates, because I know there have been great individual exhibitions popping up, and you know, people showing working space and people coming in to see those. But I think when you are planning to develop something that could continue and could grow in terms of the number of exhibitions. The early days, obviously, for the website at the moment, but as the exhibitions start to grow, you're kind of building something which is saying, you know, this is ongoing, this will continue, this conversation is something that we can engage in over a period of time during the Russian invasion, after the Russian invasion, hopefully when we're all back to trying to sort out the world post-Russian invasion. But it's something that can continue, that's there as something that we can keep going back to, revisiting, seeing new photographers, new exhibitions, things that we haven't sort of seen before. And it's a resource for people, which I think is amazing, absolutely amazing. I wanted to just ask you one last question, actually, Viktor and Mats. What is sort of next for the platform? You know, how can people get involved with what you're doing?
It's one of the most difficult questions, but I think one of the main goal for us today is to expand in this community, our community of Ukrainian photographies, to invite more researchers, more curators. We plan to invite young researchers and young curators to share their new experience and our new experience as well, because this platform for us is the new experience. And maybe in the future, this platform could be like living archive with different texts, with different images in the exhibitions, with a lot of profiles of Ukrainian artists that working with photography as artistic medium. Yeah,
can be used by researchers to art historians. Yeah, I think what maybe it's not humble, but what I think is beautiful about the structure of the platform is that we don't know where it is going. I mean, we know the direction, but the beauty of it is that people are shaping the way it develop, right? I mean, depending on like a beautifully curated exhibition that Mariama just did, and I think it was basically the manifestation of this idea that someone who never had experience with Ukrainian art, or maybe like just not much experience, has a totally different perspective and different understanding and can interpret it differently. And that what makes me happy to see when the new show comes in and we have a new meanings, new ideas, new like interpretation.
Not only we, but authors as well.
And the authors as well, yeah.
So very important for all participants of this project. And we are always very open and welcome you researchers and you curators and individuals or organizations. We're really welcome.
So if everyone watching us have at least a small desire to take part, we'll be very happy to hear from you. And
well, I have to say they're very, very lovely. You're both very lovely people and very easy to work with. So as get out of the way, because not everybody is, but you are very lovely and easy to work with. So I would definitely encourage. And actually, we've got a question from an audience member where I think what they want to really ask is about, you know, how do we invigorate a community to engage with and think about the future, because part of what you're saying is this is building a future, isn't it, at a time where so many organizations are focused on the present. And again, I think perhaps, I don't know, I mean, Mariama, you might have something to say about this as well, but you know, my feeling is that a lot of organizations are very focused on the present. A lot of curators are focused on their next project, etc., etc. This, I think, is an opportunity to actually get engaged with something which is building something quite unique and special from the ground up. This is my feeling, is that those young curators that may be looking at this and seeing it as, actually, this is an opportunity to get involved with something which is building an archive from the beginning. It feels, and it is therefore building a future. I don't know, Mariama, what you think about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the idea that this is a living archive is definitely a distinction from many archives which are only enlivened, or they're only active when people are looking at them or kind of taking from them or researching them. I think the idea that the living archive, because it's always being added to, is an incentive for artists to think the work that they're making now is going into an archive that will constantly be useful now and in the future. And I completely understand this feeling, because it's quite real, this feeling of being bound or kind of fixated by time constraints as well. And I think maybe more projects like this is maybe one of the ways that we can break out of that idea or those constraints of time. But also, as I mentioned before, and as we've said before, this is one of the ways that we develop or establish partnerships and collaborations. And often good partnerships or collaborations can be mid or long term. So this project also acts as a way of introducing curators and researchers and practitioners to each other. And this can easily become the start of a relationship that you have with an artist that, you know, takes place over a course of years or over the course of someone's career. And I think that's a really nice way also of thinking about how do we expand that notion of time, or what does time look like or feel like to a curator or a practitioner, and just trying to revise or to adapt that a little bit to be a bit more forgiving and a little bit, yeah, I'd say like a bit more forgiving of the ebbs and flows of someone's practice. We can't expect practitioners to constantly be producing work. So we do need to also be aware that sometimes someone might not have a new piece of work, and that is also completely fine.
And I'm going to just go to another viewer's question, which to put to you guys particularly. And this viewer is interested in your own experience and what the experience of actually living in exile at this time has had on your own practice or your own thinking.
it's not an easy question to answer. Yeah.
No.
I mean, we moved to the UK before the war. I mean, more than 6 months, I think. But of course, it's an experience you would never expect to have. And it's not easy. I mean, at least now, it's not easy to have like a concrete feelings and vision of it, because, yeah, it's something totally new. And I think if maybe before we were more focused on, we are now even more focused on Ukrainian arts and culture.
Mhm.
because there's more motivation to, I think, like the whole country. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
totally new sense of purpose and motivations to be a part of
The society.
to be a part of the society. Yeah.
Yeah, it's urgent. There's an urgency, isn't there, about that kind of, and your agency within it is different now. So you have that agency because you've got that knowledge of Ukrainian. You've had that agency and you can share that. And I could imagine, and as you are doing, I could imagine that that is something which will take maybe a couple of a while to actually understand, how that changes or evolves in terms of your own practice as curators. But yes, a very interesting question. I think we are running out of time. We come to the end of the discussion. It is for me to actually just ask everybody that is watching us or that may watch the video afterwards. We will actually put this video onto our YouTube channel. So for everyone, please do share it. It's an incredibly important, just by watching this, you are part of supporting Ukrainian photographies. What we'd really love is for you to be more part of supporting Ukrainian photographies and have a real think about, what you do and what your skills are and how you can connect with this project. Because I think it's very special, and everybody involved is dedicated in terms of developing and keeping Ukrainian culture alive. And you can all be part of that. You can all be part of keeping Ukrainian culture alive. So that's the final plea to everybody. But we're going to sign off now, but I want to thank Victor and Max so much, well, for coming to us in the first place, I have to say, because I think it's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm incredibly proud of what you've done with very little resource, and how you're developing this network of people to support and keep Ukrainian photographies alive. And we all want to be part of that. And obviously, thank you, Mariama, too, for your lovely exhibition that you've curated, which everyone can see on the web platform, and for being part of this discussion. And thank you to everybody that's been here tonight. Like I say, do share the link to the website with everybody you know, actually, just everybody you know would be good. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Take care and speak to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.